Welcome everybody to this new episode of Trace and Tell with Ade and Joe. We're glad to have you here again. This is our fourth episode. Um, I don't think we like when we started off. I wasn't sure we're going to get up to four episodes this this quick.
Me either.
Yeah, so it's nice to have you guys here again. We've been getting some form of good reviews on LinkedIn, and we appreciate it. For the guys that have seen our podcast or listened to it on Spotify or watched it on YouTube, we really appreciate it. And I think some of the things you're saying are the stuff that are actually pushing us to do more. So we really appreciate that. Uh, on a lighter note, just to start, before we get into the topic of the day or the topics of the day rather, so after the last episode and before this current one, Joe had his birthday celebration. And I would like him to kind of just give us a bit about what he did. Yeah,
Yeah,
Joe.
no, cool. Thanks for the shout out. And also, I just want to say thanks to everyone who's promoted the podcast recently too, if you're listening and yeah, helping us get motivated to continue with it. And glad to hear people are enjoying it. But yeah, I had my birthday a week ago and had a little boat party. Figured I'd celebrate a little more than maybe the average birthday year. I didn't do much the last few years. Well, last year I was like getting married like the week before, and so didn't do a whole lot. And yeah, it's summertime. Just wanted to get some friends together and enjoy. We lucked out on the weather, had great, beautiful weather, and
Wow.
yeah, it was cool to cruise around, and we did a little swimming in the water, and yeah, had some food and just enjoyed the summer atmosphere. So yeah, it was super cool.
I'm so jealous of you, right? And the reason why I say so is because the whole of Europe is experiencing heat wave and like really high temperature. But Estonia is not doing that. Like it has been raining. So today is Sunday. This is like Sunday evening, and it has been raining since Saturday morning. It
Wow.
stops for like 1 hour, resumes. So I don't know. We don't have summer in Estonia, at least for this year. Hopefully, we would have like a less ash winter or so. But yeah, I'm so jealous. Wow. Okay. Okay. Nice. 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 You've given me ideas for my next birthday also.
Yeah.
Cool. So and also last week we discussed just kind of giving a recap to our listeners. Last week we discussed about you won't pay. We kind of did a little bit of like updates on some of those on that specific topic, and then we discussed Philax protocol itself, which is trying to improve the security in Web3 space, and sort of ended it with now I've forgotten for a second. Cock protocol and their exploits. Uh, this week, uh, it's a little bit different because like we have something that is not generally like in the lines of exploit, although there is one topic that speaks about exploits. But this week we are actually trying to go into some of the, so to speak, hidden conversations around crypto, especially from the intelligence and investigation side of things, right? And we'll be discussing three things. Number one, we'll be talking about intelligence and clustering generally. What does that mean, and why you should even be interested in something of that nature? But two, we are going to talk about the Nobitex exploits. Um, and the different plays happening on that front. And we'll wrap up the episode with AI in security and investigations when it comes to crypto. So those are the three things we have for you today. Yes, let's get into it. All right. We're back and let's talk about clustering and crypto intelligence. And I'm going to start off this way, right? Because Clustering is generally what every blockchain investigator uses, but I'm going to put out a very argumentative point. It is what most of us don't fully trust. And before I go into kind of like why we don't trust it and all of those stuff, I think it's also good to sort of like give our listeners what is clustering and what exactly are we referring to, right? But before we
Mhm.
can talk about clustering, we have to talk about attribution itself. And attribution in the simplest form essentially is saying a wallet address has been labeled and has been attributed to an entity. Now, this entity could be like an individual, could be like a public of a private or a private entity, organization. It could be a very legitimate entity and it could be like an illegal entity, right? It
Mhm.
could be all shades and forms of it, but essentially what we are doing is attribution basically means we are taking a real world identity and attributing it or attaching it to a wallet address or a set of wallet address we are seeing online. That is attribution. But a step further in that attribution life cycle is having to cluster the wallet addresses because the essence is that a wallet address, though it is one, you can have 10 of it, you can have 1 million of it, 50 million of different addresses that belongs to that entity. So the best way to go about it is to cluster them and say these 50 million addresses belongs to this single entity. And how is that being done? For different chains, it's a bit different, right? For like blockchain, the basics of it is like change address heuristics, looking for patterns of or where does the change address or change transaction goes to. If it's going to a different address, or then there is likelihood that the sender and that change address is owned by the same person. That is just basics of what Bitcoin blockchain as a technology has given, right? But that also has its clause because you can't continue on a change address heuristics until you get to like a 5 million address, right? You can't actually do that. So there's always going to be a clause in there where you have to stop. But on even like on EVM based chains, like address based chains, right? For like Ethereum, Avalanche, Polygomatic, you tend to use things like gas analysis to cluster addresses together. And even for like systems or protocols like Thorn blockchain, you use something a little bit different. And even with Thorn blockchain, you can have like a single address where you can identify that as belonging to an entity. And then for every single user of that, let's say an exchange, you give them like a memo function to represent their specific deposits. I think breaking down a little bit is also kind of like the approach of saying, um, for example, like my gym subscription right now, um, I am paying to the same bank account that everybody else in the gym is using. But the only way for the gym to know my payments is for me to use like a specific ID in that
Mhm.
field of like my payments. So that field of my payments where I'm using that specific ID is more or less like what I can call the memo function in crypto, right? Everybody's using the same wallet address, but the memo is different to specify or identify your deposit, right? So
Mhm.
that is kind of like the clustering efforts and how you identify that these 5 million addresses belongs to Binance. These 2 million addresses belongs to Binance. So yeah, in a nutshell, that is like clustering as a start to our conversation. Yeah. Anything you want to say in that, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, it can get kind of complex, I think, when you're tracing and knowing what is what. And there is definitely like an element that feels fairly subjective and depends, maybe even, I think, different tooling and different databases probably do the attribution a little bit differently than others and the way they cluster, like the metrics that they look at and why they would cluster certain addresses probably is different than others as well. Or I don't know, like I that is correct, correct, or you would know better than me, but like each company probably has a different standard or process of how to cluster, I suppose.
Yeah, I think on the base level they do the same thing.
Hmm.
They use the same heuristics, but I think some of them have something a little bit different, especially when it comes to other metadata they use to identify an entity. So, like I think, for example, Chainalysis has what they call signals, which they've sort of like marketed as saying they're able to identify potential addresses that belongs to certain entities based on their patterns. They can't necessarily tell you that this address belongs to this entity or this organization, but I can tell you that based on the pattern of how they receive funds, how they send funds, and all of the things they do, it is most likely belonging to this specific entity or type of entity. Yeah. So the all of them has like all of this a bit of differences in that aspect.
Yeah. And then, I mean, it can get really maybe tricky with how you decipher between shared wallets and the internal like deposit addresses of exchanges and yeah, kind of navigating what is what. And it seems it could be certainly difficult. And yeah, I don't know. How would you account for like shared wallets or what about like multi-signature addresses and things like this? That would the clustering around this seems to be a little complicated, or I would think, yeah.
Well, I think when it comes to like shared wallets, so an example of a shared wallets environment that has been a that has been like a very hard nut to crack in the ecosystem is Kobo wallets. And Kobo Wallet is very specific in the way they do their thing because number one, for Kobo Wallet is like a wallet infrastructure. So I, as an entity, can go to Kobo Wallet and then have a bunch of addresses from Kobo Wallet to to carry out my operations. Another entity can do that, right? But it because they are all using like this a similar infrastructure, you can be making it or you can be tracing to Kobo Wallet and then think you're still tracing a specific entity or a specific user's transaction, not knowing that you've actually entered like an infrastructure, a mini infrastructure in the larger infrastructure space. So it's kind of like a nested set of wallets within a larger wallet's attribution. Kobo wallet is one example. I think like Fireblocks also to some extent is also like an example of those specific scenarios where it is actually very hard to attribute or cluster. But for multi-sig, I think multi-sig, I don't think they actually add that much because at the end of the day, if you look at most exchange code wallets that they sort of like published online, they're mostly multi-sigs, right? But like the fact that they've published those wallet addresses online sort of gives you ease of actually attributing it to them. So, like for Binance, you can go to CoinGecko, you see their code wallet addresses. For Kraken and all of those other exchanges, they have all of their code wallets out there. And I think this came up during the FTX issue where they need to show proof of reserve that they actually have those funds in their wallet addresses. So, but yeah, it's an interesting aspect of investigations, and the reason why I said majority of a majority of investigators do not necessarily trust it 100%. And it is fair, to be honest, because there is the aspect of having a ground truth attribution, which is like, oh, I went to Binance and I generated this wallet address. Fine, good, right? Everything after that is more or less like using heuristics or some form of scientific methodology to determine that this address belongs to this entity, right? So in that case, those ones are still a little bit fairly easy to identify. But when it comes to an address that is probably like having 50 or 500,000 transactions and it is not labeled on any of those tools, and then you are still thinking you're actually interacting with an individual, not knowing you've actually moved into like a service address of some sort. So I think that is where the issues come into play. That is where also OSINT comes into play because there are a lot of investigations I've done where you trace and then you get to some of those high volume addresses, but they are not labeled on those tools. So you just have to go to open source. And at the end of the day, you probably find them in like a document, like or in a documentation of a certain project where they mention this is our address, right? We use this address as a smart contract router or whatever of that nature. So that helps. But yeah, it's the world we live in, it's the space we are in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the point too, when you're getting to something really like pivotal in an investigation, is to
Hmm.
cross-reference, and
Yeah.
just a standard good practice of any sort of data analysis. So yeah, don't use just one source, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Don't use just one source. Intelligence is built, but also it can be biased. Yeah, if it's as simple as if we say we are sticking to just the ground truth attribution, we won't have this as much data. But if we are also sort of like moving towards like having much data, having because and this is where it gets a little bit different from like um paid attributions for like the likes of Chainalysis, TRM, Elliptic, and all of those other players compared to like open source attributions like maybe Akam or even some that also happens on Etherscan, right? There is a little bit of difference because some has more they spent more on it, put it that way, in terms of for them to be able to get the attribution, and some are just like a random person coming online and then saying like, "Oh, this wallet address belongs to an organization or belongs to whatever," right? So I think those are some of the other things that people should keep in mind, and like it's a fairly interesting space. I hope more people would actually join the intelligence side of crypto.
Definitely, definitely.
Cool. So just so like shifting gears a little bit to our second conversation of the day, it's, it's Nobitex. I think a lot of people would have heard about the whole Nobitex issue, but I think there's a little bit of background story, a backstory to the Nobitex exploit in itself, right? A couple of weeks ago, the Israeli armed forces sort of like um, made some what do you call it, military actions or military operations in Iran, and then they took out some of the military heads and Iranian nuclear facility heads. They took out some of their officials. I think in retaliation for that, Iran also sort of like sent missiles to Israel, and then it became a you send I send sort of scenario. A lot of people died on both sides, obviously, but I think outside of this geopolitical tension in itself, then a group came up. I really can't pronounce their name, but I think their English translation loosely is predatory sparrow. They
Correct.
came
Yeah.
out, yeah, they came out and kind of claimed that they've actually hacked Nobitex, which is the largest exchange in Iran. Hacking the exchange itself is not just the only thing, but the funds were actually sent to a vanity address, which most likely they don't actually have the private keys to access those addresses. Based on the fact that for you to actually create a vanity address of that nature, you need a lot of computation or power, yeah, computational power, which most likely they don't have, right? So now the issue here is that whilst the exploit itself has happened, majority of the players in this space are not seeing it as exploits, or they are not even talking about the exploits. One, um, and obviously, I would understand that it's because of the geopolitical tension that surrounds it, the political players or the political play that is surrounding it. One, now the aspect of the funds being sent to a vanity address or an address that nobody is going to be able to ever recover also puts into question of inside Nobitex, obviously it is not just only government funds or what have you that are there. There are also like random individuals that lives and are just Iranians and are trying to possibly edge their currencies or look out for ways to actually get something outside of their government control, and then they're actually using Nobitex as that option, right? It's also kind of like puts them into a little bit of a scenario where they've actually lost their savings right now based on this incident. But yeah, I think it's very, very tricky. But yeah, what's your take on this generally?
No, exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head a little bit there with how to think about it. What, is this a good thing or this and that? Obviously, when it comes to, it depends what your alliances are, and like depending how much Nobitex was actually involved with the Iranian government. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there are indications that I think Elliptic did a lot of good attribution, as we just mentioned, showing that they did indeed send a lot of money to their different terrorist networks throughout the region,
Mm-hmm.
including like Hamas and the Houthis, etc.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, in this regard, maybe attacking them is, depending on your opinion, a positive thing. I would never feel too sorry of making havoc against the Iranian regime. However, there were also many just, I think, innocent. It depends what you mean on innocent, but I would clarify as probably innocent everyday general users using
Yeah.
Nobitex, already a country that is suffering quite a lot financially. Not everyone is a supporter of the Iranian government, as we are, everyone knows. And so, yeah, it's certainly an exploit to these users who were just trying to hedge against the falling Iranian currency, which has been doing a lot lately. And now they're kind of out of luck. And it's a bit interesting because it gets into the whole question about sanctions and how they work. I mean,
Yeah.
Nobitex themselves was not on a sanction list
Yes.
actually. So to just go after them in a unilateral, non legally structured way,
Mm-hmm.
they just attacked them in essentially a rogue way
Yeah.
and took their funds. So, it's not so different if the context of what like Lazarus does.
Yeah.
From Lazarus' perspective, they think they are doing good and attacking bad actors.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that's kind of the big issue is just doing something out of the jurisdiction or out of the scope of what sanctions are identifying. Um, and that you're getting into like a sticky situation because now the users of Notabex who've lost their funds, likely are not going to be able to get them back because they're in a sanctioned country. Supposedly, this hacker group also went after one of the Iranian
Banks.
major banks as well,
Yeah.
like right before the hack. So this made it a little, also furthermore more difficult for people to, yeah, do financial services. So yeah, that's I guess my takeaway. It's a bit sticky, and state-sponsored groups are probably, this is becoming a thing that we're seeing in regards to the crypto world, and especially when countries are on sanction lists, they're going to create interesting solutions to counter them. And yeah, I mean, that's what I have to say regarding the sanctions categorization. Um, One other thing too, which I think is interesting, because I think the source code for Node2bex and the rest of their networking
Yeah.
was released,
Yes.
and that brought to light a few different items. So the first, I guess, would be that it seemed to be a fairly easy thing to copy and replicate in other places. So, yeah, sanctioned countries probably have a blueprint now in ways to keep their financial services running via crypto as a main component of that, or a main piece of architecture. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see how it develops. It was pretty clear that they were able to continue with their financial services despite the sanctions, and yeah, so that was also an interesting takeaway for me too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was reading recently, I think yesterday, that Nobitex actually mentioned or they posted on Twitter X that they are restarting some of their services. So I think it's definitely going to be something to keep an eye out on because roughly 90 million has gone down the drains. Yeah, we can argue for or against that majority of that asset belongs to the IRGC. So we can argue it belongs to them, and we can also argue that it also part of it also belongs to just random Iranian citizens that are trying to edge their government currencies, right? So yeah, it as you say, it's a very sticky situation. Yeah, I think we'll definitely like keep an eye out on how this actually goes down. So
Yeah, I think it,
mhm.
it's like the precedent it's setting.
Yes,
It's basically saying you can bypass traditional sanctions
yeah,
and just enact direct action and apparently be okay with it, depending on, your
yeah,
certain opinion. So yeah, that is kind of like the concerning thing. Now we're just gonna have like vigilante like justice going around, and justice is subjective depending on who you are,
true,
and
true.
yeah, who knows, could get a little wild if that continues. So yeah.
Yeah, oh, we'll see, we'll see. Space is still developing, and 11, 12 years out, we're still seeing new things every day. Cool. We just take a little break here and then come back for the last segment. All right, welcome back to this fourth episode of Trace and Theo with Adi and Joe. And just to wrap up this specific episode, we'll be talking about impact of AI in investigations and security, specifically in crypto. Uh, I don't think right now it's sort of like a major topic. I think it's a major topic when it comes to investments, where people are trying to figure out um, the what's the word, the bridge between AI and crypto, and then creating a token, or how you can actually use AI to fund investments, or how can you can use AI to run some specific DeFi trading strategies or whatnot, right? It's very big on that side. But when it comes to investigations and security, I don't think it's that big yet. But I'll be sure to say I think some people are actually like working on this currently, maybe like sort of like trying out one thing or the other around it, right? So it's everywhere, even in tracing, but I think the main question is it helping or is it hallucinating?
Yeah,
uh,
good question.
so is it helping or is it hallucinating? Because I think one of the things which I can say is like, okay, AI can do better right now on is the ability to actually go through a website, see what a website contains, extract a wallet address out of that website, which is sort of like the first thing you do when it comes to attribution and clustering, right? Extracting a wallet address out of a website, and then based on the context of that website, label that wallet address as belonging to this website, and then a human can actually pick it up from there and then continue. So this also would be able to help, especially when it comes to scams generally, right? Because like if we look at the whole pig butchering scenario so far, right? There's always a methodology to it. There's always something that if you've been in this space for long, once you see a website, you can actually identify that this is like a scam website, like it has nothing to offer, right? So those are some of like metadata that you can actually fix, or you can feed into an AI, and then you can actually use that metadata to look for those patterns and then identify some of those big butchering websites at scale, right? Because there's so much that human can do, but when you have like a system that is running 24/7, you might as well just allow it to do what it can do, right? So you can do all of those things. You can even do the whole um address poisoning situation, right? Anything that can be automated, it is perfect for it. It's very, very perfect for it, right? But I think it is not what we need in investigations proper. The reason why I said
Interesting.
that, yeah,
Yeah.
and the reason why I said that is because in investigations, you need context, you
Yep. Yep.
need a background knowledge of things, of the actor, of their past activities, of even why they are doing certain things. Yes, you might be able to to feed all of these things into AI, but I think there's always that human touch in having to do all of those things. Like, okay, let's take DPRK for example. Yeah, they are tracing or they are laundering funds through different bridges and different DeFi services or solutions, swapping tokens, and then bridging. Yeah, you can use AI to actually trace all of those things, but it gets to a point where a human would have to take a look at this thing and say, okay, you know what? I think we are going out of way because right now we are no more in the DPRK environment. We are probably like in another environment entirely. But yeah,
Hmm.
it can do automations proper, but when it comes to investigations fully, context wise, being able to understand and the experience that comes with it, I don't think it is something you can undo right now. What's your take?
Yeah, well, actually, to be clear, like, are there automations like this happening? Like, for, the DPRK instances, can you automate and use an AI to trace them to some degree? Or,
So to some degree, yeah, they
yeah.
should be able to trace through bridges because essentially what you're tracing through on a bridge is figuring out what is being sent and what is being received on the other side of. So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
bridge in itself, if you can get an explorer that gives you a view of the bridge. So you can easily plug an AI to that explorer and say, when it gets to like let's say third chain, this is what you need to look out for, and then give me the resulting outflow. So yeah, those things are
What,
possible.
what tools currently do that? Or,
Um I don't think they are general. I don't think they are what's the word? They are public yet, but I think a lot of people are actually playing with that in the background.
yeah, okay, interesting. Because I've always, especially as since I'm like a bit newer to tracing, that it feels something, you're just following data. It feels like it could be done by an AI. It's, following a trail of data. But you're right. I mean, context and reading the situation definitely takes a human touch. So it is a bit of a weird, like, I don't know if like paradox is the right word, but like, yeah, strange thing because on one hand it looks like it could easily be done by a machine, but in reality it takes a lot of human judgment. So um, yeah, it's really weird. Yeah.
I can give you an example and
Yeah.
just pick up a transaction hash. I don't know if
Hmm.
it can do it right now, but just pick up a random transaction hash and just put it on ChatGPT and ask it to give you an understanding of what this transaction is all about. It's not going to give you the context. It's just going to tell you based on what it's saying. Like, oh, wallet address OX whatever is sending 5 tokens of whatever to this wallet address. But that specific transaction hash might actually be an interaction with a smart contract. It's not going to tell you all of those things. It's never going to tell you, oh, it's actually interacting with a smart contract that is converting 5 BNB to one XRP or whatever, right? It's not going to tell you all of those things. It's just going to tell you what it's saying. So that is where
Mm.
the human feel and human the context comes into play, right? So yeah, I think it's still there's still so many things that can still be done with AI right now, automation generally, and obviously, like I think over time we'll get better at it. But I think it's still I won't put my money on it to say like oh AI is going to replace investigators.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's interesting. I'm obviously not like an AI or machine learning expert or engineer, but it does feel that, if you specified it or made it niched to the needs of tracing and how to like get more data points to contextualize it to some degree. I'm sure there's definitely a lot of room for AI to make tracing better and more efficient, but it certainly would never replace the human. But I do think there's a lot of need and a big opportunity for AI to make a positive impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, super curious to see what might come about the non-public tools yet. Yeah, it seems like a space that's like kind of screaming for some sort of innovation. And when you're just like manually clicking through a tool and tracing, it feels
Yeah.
very just feels not like overly I don't know, progressive or
Yeah.
yeah, we have all these great innovative tools and automations for all our other like processes in your everyday life, but you know,
Yeah.
we're still over here just like clicking and reading these crazy addresses and hashes and yeah, again, it feels like it's screaming for some innovation and this sort of thing. So yeah, let's see.
I think as to some degrees, like if you look at transaction monitoring solutions,
Hmm.
even if we're not going to call it AI, there is obviously a bit of analysis that goes into the data that says if there is an exposure of this percentage to this already attributed wallet address as illicit, you should actually call this specific address or this transaction as illicit, right? So there is already that. So even though we're not going to call it AI, maybe machine learning to some degree, right? But like I think those things exist, but they are not at the point where all you need to do is go to like a ChatGPT interface and then type what happened to this wallet address, where did the funds go to? Like it's not there yet. Or like yeah, those are the things that we can't see right now. But also talking about on the security aspect of it, like are there things that which you feel like right now, um, with the current setup of all of these LLMs and the likes that they can help with security in Web3?
Yeah, for sure. No, there's definitely already a pretty noticeable impact from AI on the security side and the prevention side of exploits and yeah, a lot of common bugs and typical exploits. There's like a top 10 or 15 or so that are pretty common and depend on the certain function of a smart contract or a protocol. Yeah, there are some tools now that will scan and help auditors look and security research look at the code and help them identify what's probably wrong. Again, it's not you have to make a human judgment call on it, of course, but it helps identify some potential problems. Sometimes it says it's a big problem, but once the human contextualizes what the protocol or the smart contract is doing, then it's not an issue. But it makes yeah, definitely on some occasions has flagged a few things that I didn't even see before when I went through it manually. So, so yeah, this is really good, and yeah, hopefully, I think those have only been out for a little bit, for maybe I don't know, I can't say exactly how long, maybe a year or two, but yeah, I'm sure this will hopefully help these very common. You know, there's like I think we mentioned it last week or so that there's a lot of
Yeah.
very easy and common bugs still being exploited for. So yeah, hopefully that helps there. Yeah.
Yeah. I think also like just from my Web2 understanding of security. So like there is a technical aspect of security which is where I would put smart contracts auditing under, right, and then there is like the process aspect of security, which is like there is a set of process. This is how you do it. Like you don't reuse passwords or you store your private keys in this, that, all of those things, right? Majority of those particular processes are more or less like checkboxes, right? So those are even aspects which I feel like AI can actually help when it comes to security in this space, being able to take a set of processes that is meant to be executed in house and then looking through if these processes are actually being followed. Because, like, for AI, it's either yes or no, right? So, even if you're doing it 90%, it's going to tell you no because
Yeah.
90 is not yes, right? So, so I think definitely AI can actually help in all of those process side of security, both in Web 2 and in Web 3 space. But I think my last statement on this still remains that you can't outsource your gut instinct when it comes to
Hmm.
some of these things. Like AI is fast, obviously, but you are still in the investigator, you are still the auditor, and your experience still matters. So use it as a tool to adapt to what you're doing, but not as a replacement to what you're doing. That's what I was saying.
No, no, not at all. I mean, it's cool. I mean, yeah, you got to be like hesitant, a little bit skeptical with it, just because it can hallucinate. So you need to be looking out for that. But ultimately, hopefully, the idea, and I find it through my like workflow that it makes other things. It gives me more time to focus on the more important things.
Yeah.
So it gives you just that headspace to focus on like the real pivotal problems. And yeah, so hopefully, I mean, ultimately, it makes tracing and these sort of Web3 security jobs easier for people. I definitely don't think it's taken jobs away. I mean, maybe like on the auditing side, it could maybe do a few junior type of things, but yeah, I don't. Again, I think it's just going to help people do their job better. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. Cool. And I think that's all we can take today. Thank you guys for joining in and listening to us rant about everything. And hopefully you've been able to get one or two things to think about. And if you feel we've actually said something that is not right or you want to expand on, you can always drop all of those things in the comment section on Spotify, yes, on YouTube, yes, even on LinkedIn, right? Yeah, we would appreciate your comments on this topic. So, uh, thanks guys for listening in, and have a wonderful day. See you next time. Peace.